analyzing the power of the characters in Resident Evil. The Resident Evil franchise has spent nearly 3 decades constructing a mythology of terror. What began in 1996 as a survival horror game set in a mansion overrun with undead has evolved into a sprawling universe where biological weapons have reshaped the boundaries of human capability and horror alike. Through this evolution, power has become currency, not the power of nations or corporations alone, but the raw physical power possessed by the creatures and individuals who populate this nightmare landscape. Understanding who holds true power within Resident Evil requires examining more than combat ability. It demands we consider intelligence, regenerative capacity, tactical thinking, the scope of influence, and the lasting impact each figure leaves on the world. This analysis ranks the most powerful figures in Resident Evil canon, drawing from the mainline games and canonical materials while avoiding speculation or fan fiction. These rankings consider documented battles, demonstrated abilities, and the measurable impact each character has had on the franchise's events. Power here isn't merely about who can punch hardest or survive longest, though these factors matter. True power encompasses the ability to shape events, to endure against overwhelming opposition, to adapt and evolve, and to force the world itself to acknowledge your existence. From superhuman tyrants to godlike entities born from fungal colonies, the Resident Evil universe has birthed nightmares that challenge our understanding of what it means to be powerful. The ranking that follows examines 15 figures who have demonstrated exceptional power within the series. Some wielded biological augmentation to transcend human limitation. Others were never human to begin with, born instead from viral engineering or fungal infection. What unites them all is their capacity to alter the trajectory of Resident Evil's narrative through sheer force of existence. These are the characters who didn't simply participate in the story of bioterrorism and survival horror. They defined it, understanding power in the Resident Evil universe. Before examining specific individuals, we must establish what constitutes power within this universe. Resident Evil operates under rules distinct from conventional action franchises. A character's strength isn't measured solely by their ability to defeat opponents in direct combat, though this remains significant. Instead, multiple factors contribute to an individual's position in the power hierarchy. Physical capability forms the foundation. Superhuman strength allows characters to shatter concrete, toss vehicles, and tear through reinforced structures. Speed determines whether a being can dodge gunfire or move faster than the human eye can track. Regeneration transforms what would be fatal injuries into temporary inconveniences, making truly killing some entities nearly impossible. The difference between someone who can heal from bullet wounds versus someone who can regenerate entire lost limbs proves substantial. Intelligence and tactical thinking separate mindless monsters from genuine threats. A creature with immense strength but no capacity for strategic thought will exhaust itself against prepared defenses. Meanwhile, an intelligent bioweapon can set traps, use weapons, pursue specific targets across entire cities, and adapt tactics based on opponent responses. The Nemesis T-Type's ability to operate rocket launchers and track specific targets demonstrated how intelligence multiplied physical threat. Albert Wesker's superhuman abilities became truly dangerous only when coupled with his genius intellect and manipulative nature. Adaptability and evolution represent another crucial dimension. Some characters possess static power levels, remaining dangerous but predictable. Others continuously evolve, developing new abilities in response to damage or environmental pressures. The G virus granted William Birkin near limitless mutation potential, allowing him to transform multiple times into progressively more powerful forms. This adaptive capacity made him extraordinarily difficult to eliminate permanently. Scope of influence extends power beyond personal combat effectiveness. Mother Miranda's century-long manipulation of an entire village, her creation of the Four Lords, and her indirect founding of Umbrella Corporation through her mentorship of Oswell Spencer demonstrates power that transcends physical confrontation. Her research into the mold influenced virtually every major event in Resident Evil's timeline, making her impact immeasurable despite her eventual defeat. Documented combat performance provides concrete evidence of capability. How a character performs in actual battles against other powerful entities reveals their true standing. Wesker's ability to casually manhandle Chris Redfield and other trained operatives, his speed that appeared as teleportation, and his survival of multiple rocket launcher explosions established his combat supremacy. Similarly, Nemesis's relentless pursuit of Jill Valentine through Raccoon City, surviving fires, explosions, and acid baths demonstrated exceptional durability. The context of era and technology matters as well. Early bioweapons like the T-02 Tyrant represented cutting-edge terror in their time, but would be considered primitive compared to later developments. Eveline's mind control capabilities made conventional military force nearly obsolete, representing a new paradigm in biological weapon evolution. Each generation of bioweapon reflected accumulated knowledge, making chronology relevant when comparing power levels. Limitations and weaknesses factor into comprehensive power assessment. Wesker's dependence on regular serum doses to maintain his abilities represented a critical vulnerability despite his overwhelming strength. Nemesis's progressive mutations eventually overwhelmed its intelligence, transforming a tactical threat into a mindless monster. Understanding these limitations contextualizes apparent power, revealing whether it can be maintained or exploited. With these criteria established, we can begin examining the specific individuals who have demonstrated the highest power levels within Resident Evil canon. The following rankings move from formidable to near godlike, tracking an ascending scale of capability that illustrates just how far biological horror has evolved within this franchise. The Foundation, Tyrants, and Enhanced Humans. The T-Series Tyrants established baseline superhuman power within Resident Evil, created through selective application of the T-Virus to genetically compatible hosts. Tyrants represented Umbrella Corporation's first successful attempt to produce controllable, superhuman bioweapons. The T-002, encountered in the original Resident Evil's Spencer Mansion, stood over 7 feet tall with exposed musculature and limited intelligence. It possessed tremendous strength, capable of killing trained operatives with single blows, but remained hampered by the T-virus's tendency to damage higher brain function. Even this primitive model required extensive firepower to neutralize, establishing the pattern that tyrants couldn't be stopped with conventional small arms. The T-103 model represented significant advancement. Mass-produced at Umbrella's Sheena Island facility, these tyrants wore heavy coats that served dual purposes as power limiters and protective gear. When damaged sufficiently, a T-103 would enter Super Tyrant mode, shedding its coat and revealing enhanced musculature, elongated talons, and increased aggression. The most famous T-103, nicknamed Mr. X or the Trench Coat Tyrant, stalked Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield through Raccoon City Police Station during the 1998 outbreak. Its ability to break through walls, shrug off gunfire, and relentlessly pursue targets made it a persistent threat despite its limited intelligence. Where Tyrants established superhuman baselines, enhanced humans demonstrated what directed intelligence could achieve with biological augmentation. Chris Redfield stands as perhaps the franchise's premier example of peak human performance, enhanced through training and experience. His muscular physique, honed through years as a member of the Special Tactics and Rescue Service, and later the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, allows him to perform feats that strain credibility for an unmodified human. His famous boulder punching scene in Resident Evil 5, while often mocked, demonstrated genuine superhuman strength. Throughout multiple games, Chris has defeated numerous bioweapons through a combination of tactics, weaponry, and sheer physical capability. Jill Valentine parallels Chris in many respects. Her U.S. Army Delta Force training provided expertise in demolitions, lockpicking, and combat that allowed her to survive encounters with some of Umbrella's deadliest creations. Her battle against Nemesis throughout Raccoon City during Resident Evil 3 proved her capability against overwhelming odds. Later, after being captured and experimented on by Wesker, Jill gained superhuman abilities that further elevated her combat effectiveness. Under mind control, she demonstrated enhanced strength, speed, and durability that allowed her to fight Chris to a standstill despite his own considerable abilities. Leon S. Kennedy evolved from rookie police officer to one of the U.S. government's most effective anti-bioterrorism agents. His survival of the Raccoon City outbreak on his first day as an officer demonstrated natural aptitude and exceptional learning speed. By Resident Evil 4, Leon had transformed into a tactical operator capable of single-handedly dismantling Los Illuminados' cult while rescuing the president's daughter. His close-quarters combat skills, demonstrated through his ability to suplex and roundhouse kick infected villagers, combined with marksmanship and tactical intelligence to create a formidable combatant. While not superhuman in the biological sense, Leon's achievements place him among the franchise's most capable humans. Jake Muller inherited superhuman potential from his father, Albert Wesker. Though not modified by prototype virus like his father, Jake demonstrated fighting skills and physical capabilities that suggested genetic advantages. His blood, containing antibodies capable of countering the C virus, made him a target for various factions during Resident Evil 6. Jake's preferred fighting style emphasized hand-to-hand combat over firearms, using techniques reminiscent of Wesker's martial arts. His ability to engage bioweapons in close combat and survive encounters that would kill ordinary humans suggested he possessed some measure of his father's enhanced physiology, though to a significantly lesser degree. These characters established the lower tiers of power within Resident Evil's hierarchy. They represent peak human performance, either through training and experience or minor genetic advantages. Against ordinary opponents, they would be unstoppable. Against the true bioweapons and superhuman entities that populate this universe, they survive through intelligence, tactics, and impressive determination rather than raw power. They serve as reference points, demonstrating what even exceptional, unmodified, or minimally modified humans can achieve. Everything above them on this ranking transcends human limitation through viral infection, fungal bonding, or deliberate biological engineering. The gap between these enhanced humans and the next tier represents a categorical shift from exceptional ability to genuine superhumanity. The entities ranked above them don't simply excel at human capabilities. They operate under entirely different biological rules, possessed of strengths, speeds, and regenerative capacities that place them in fundamentally different categories of existence. Tier 1: Intelligent bioweapons and early mutations. The Nemesis T-type represents Umbrella Corporation's successful attempt to overcome the fundamental limitation plaguing all previous Tyrant models: lack of intelligence. Created at Umbrella Europe's 6th laboratory, Nemesis resulted from implanting an NEA-type parasite into a T-103 Tyrant host. This parasite, itself a product of decades of research, infested the host's brainstem and functioned as a secondary brain, allowing the creation to retain intelligence while benefiting from the Tyrant's physical advantages. The result proved terrifying. Standing over 7 feet tall in its initial form, Nemesis wore a specially designed coat that functioned as both bulletproof protection and restraint system. Unlike previous Tyrants, Nemesis could understand complex orders, make tactical decisions, and operate sophisticated weaponry. Its signature rocket launcher, far too large for normal humans to carry, allowed it to engage targets from range rather than relying solely on close combat. When armed with its rocket launcher, Nemesis shot down a rescue helicopter attempting to evacuate Jill Valentine from Raccoon City, demonstrating both accuracy and tactical awareness to eliminate escape routes. The Nemesis T-type's physical capabilities matched its intelligence. It possessed superhuman strength sufficient to smash through walls and doors, speed that allowed it to sprint faster than uninfected humans could run, and durability that let it survive fire, explosions, and heavy weapons fire that would destroy lesser bioweapons. Its most distinctive feature was its extraordinary regenerative ability. Throughout its pursuit of STARS members in Raccoon City, Nemesis sustained massive damage repeatedly, only to repair itself and resume hunting. When Carlos Oliveira managed to trigger an explosion that destroyed Nemesis's rocket launcher and inflicted severe burns, the creature simply retreated, regenerated, and returned more dangerous than before. What made Nemesis particularly formidable was its limited speech capability. Though its vocabulary consisted essentially of a single word, STARS, this verbal ability demonstrated a level of cognition absent in all previous Tyrant models. It could identify specific targets by sight, track them across an entire city, and prioritize threats. When Jill proved difficult to corner, Nemesis demonstrated enough cunning to set ambushes and cut off escape routes rather than simply charging directly. The creature's mutations following severe damage illustrated both its adaptability and its ultimate weakness. After losing its power limiter coat in a train crash, Nemesis underwent significant transformation, its body mutating to repair damage. It developed tentacles that could be used as weapons, extending from its body to grab, impale, or infect victims. One such tentacle attack infected Jill with a T-virus strain, requiring her to obtain a vaccine before the infection killed her. In this second form, Nemesis lost some intelligence but gained additional physical power and versatility. Further damage triggered additional mutations. The third form saw Nemesis lose nearly all human characteristics, transforming into a quadrupedal creature with enhanced speed and strength. The fourth form, encountered in Umbrella's dead factory, represented near complete loss of humanoid features, with Nemesis becoming a massive creature dominated by exposed organs and tentacles. Its final form, after being dissolved in acid and absorbing a dead tyrant's biomass, transformed it into a barely mobile mass of flesh capable of spitting acid, but lacking the speed and intelligence that made earlier forms so dangerous. This progression illustrated Nemesis's core limitation. While its regenerative mutations allowed it to survive damage that would kill almost any other creature, each transformation degraded its intelligence and tactical capability. The thing that made Nemesis truly dangerous, its ability to think, plan, and use weapons, diminished with each mutation. By its final form, Nemesis had devolved into a powerful but mindless creature easily outmaneuvered by Jill once she obtained the experimental finger railgun designed specifically to neutralize regenerating bioweapons. Despite this weakness, Nemesis's impact on Resident Evil's power hierarchy remains significant. It represented the culmination of Umbrella's Tyrant program, proving that intelligent bioweapons were possible. The psychological impact of an unstoppable creature that could think and adapt proved as significant as its physical threat. Jill Valentine's survival of Nemesis's pursuit established her as one of the franchise's most capable operatives, as defeating Nemesis required not just firepower, but tactical brilliance and unwavering determination. The creature's relentlessness, continuing its pursuit even as its body degraded and mutated, made it one of the most memorable antagonists in horror gaming history. Jack Baker presents a different category of threat. Unlike engineered bioweapons, Jack began as a normal human who became infected by Eveline's mold following his rescue of the girl and her handler from the shipwreck in Dulvey, Louisiana. The mold infection granted Jack regenerative abilities that exceeded even Nemesis in some respects. Throughout Resident Evil 7, Ethan Winters repeatedly killed Jack through methods that would permanently end most threats, chainsawing him in half, burying an axe in his skull, setting him on fire, and even shooting him in the head at point-blank range. Each time, Jack's mold-enhanced physiology allowed him to regenerate and continue attacking. What made Jack particularly dangerous wasn't just his regeneration, but his retention of intelligence and personality. Albeit twisted by Eveline's influence, he could speak, taunt victims, and demonstrate genuine cunning in setting traps. His knowledge of the Baker property allowed him to use his environment tactically, appearing from unexpected locations and leveraging the mansion's layout to corner prey. Jack wielded weapons ranging from shovels to chainsaws, combining superhuman strength with tool use in ways purely bestial creatures couldn't match. Jack's mutations followed a different pattern than Umbrella's engineered bioweapons. Rather than losing intelligence as he mutated, Jack retained enough consciousness to beg for death during brief moments of clarity, suggesting his human mind remained trapped within the mutated body. His later forms grew increasingly monstrous. One mutation saw him fuse with the walls of the mansion itself, creating a massive, partially immobile form with incredible reach and strength. His final form, encountered after Eveline's control intensified, transformed him into a massive calcified creature that required specially developed toxins to neutralize. The key distinction between Jack and creatures like Nemesis lies in origin and control. Nemesis was created deliberately as a weapon, engineered from the ground up to hunt and kill. Jack was a victim, a good man corrupted by infection and mind control. His power came not from careful engineering, but from the mold's extraordinary capacity to restructure and revitalize tissue. This made his abilities unpredictable and in some ways more versatile than purpose-built bioweapons. The mold didn't follow programmed parameters. It adapted organically to damage, creating solutions that fit immediate needs rather than conforming to predetermined mutation patterns. Both Nemesis and Jack demonstrate power levels significantly above baseline Tyrants and enhanced humans. Their regenerative abilities, intelligence retention, and combat effectiveness place them in a category where conventional weaponry proves inadequate, yet both also show clear limitations. Nemesis's intelligence degraded with each mutation, eventually reducing it to a mindless mass. Jack, despite his extraordinary regeneration, remained vulnerable to specialized anti-mold toxins and could be temporarily incapacitated through sufficient physical trauma. They represent significant threats that required specialized approaches to defeat, establishing them as formidable but not invincible. The next tier above them includes entities whose power doesn't degrade through mutation but instead compounds, creatures whose abilities stem from viruses specifically designed to transcend rather than merely enhance human biology. These entities operate under different rules, their power scales measuring not just what they can survive but what they can become. Tier 2: Evolved Mutations and Adaptive Bioweapons. William Birkin's transformation into a G creature represents one of Resident Evil's most significant power escalations. As the Umbrella Corporation researcher who discovered and developed the G virus, Birkin understood his creation's potential better than anyone. When Umbrella Security Service operators shot him while attempting to steal his research, the dying scientist injected himself with the G virus, triggering a transformation that would demonstrate the virus's terrifying evolutionary potential. The G virus differed fundamentally from the T virus, where the T virus created mutations by damaging and partially rewriting existing genetic code. The G virus replaced the host's entire cellular structure with a new organism capable of continuous evolution. The virus didn't merely mutate its host, it transformed them into an entirely new species with theoretically unlimited adaptive capacity. Birkin's resulting metamorphosis showcased this principle through 5 distinct forms, each more powerful than the last. G-Birkin's first form retained significant human characteristics. His right arm had mutated grotesquely, developing enhanced musculature, prominent veins, and a massive eye embedded in the shoulder. This arm possessed strength far exceeding the T-103 Tyrant's umbrella had mass-produced. When confronting the Tyrant dispatched to Raccoon City to recover G-virus samples, G-Birkin effortlessly defeated it, demonstrating superiority over what had been Umbrella's premier bioweapon line. Despite his mutation, Birkin retained enough intelligence in this form to recognize his research and pursue those who had stolen it, suggesting the G-virus could grant power without the intelligence loss plaguing T-virus mutations. The second form emerged after Birkin sustained massive damage. His body underwent radical restructuring, developing a second smaller arm beneath the primary mutated limb, increasing overall muscle mass and further distorting his appearance. The eye on his shoulder remained, possibly serving genuine visual function, or perhaps representing the G virus's tendency toward producing optical organs as part of its mutation pattern. This form demonstrated enhanced speed and strength compared to the first, with Birkin capable of charging through obstacles and shrugging off gunfire that would incapacitate most bioweapons. G-Birkin's third form marked the point where human characteristics became almost entirely subsumed by mutation. His head split open, revealing a new head growing from within, while the original remained as vestigial tissue. Additional eyes appeared across his body, granting 360-degree vision that made surprising him nearly impossible. His arms multiplied to 4, each possessing clawed appendages capable of rending flesh and steel alike. This form's speed reached extraordinary levels, allowing Birkin to sprint and leap with agility that belied his increased mass. His strength grew proportionally, and his regenerative capacity expanded to where he could heal from wounds that would have killed his earlier forms within seconds. The fourth mutation transformed Birkin into something barely recognizable as having ever been human. He became a hexapedal creature moving on all 6 limbs with disturbing speed, his head elongated into a crocodilian shape with massive jaws lined with teeth. The eyes that had appeared in previous forms proliferated further, covering his shoulders and back. This form combined the speed of a charging rhinoceros with the strength to tear through reinforced barriers. Birkin in this state represented pure predatory power, no longer hampered by bipedal limitations and capable of navigating environments in ways his previous forms couldn't. The fifth and final form encountered represented the G-Virus's ultimate expression within Birkin's body. He became a massive, barely mobile mass of flesh, tentacles, and teeth, resembling something between a massive tumor and a carnivorous plant. Tentacles extending from the main mass could grab and crush victims, while multiple maws could bite and devour. This form sacrificed mobility for sheer regenerative capacity and offensive reach, becoming nearly impervious to conventional weapons. Only the explosion of the Nest facility's self-destruct system and the subsequent train crash finally destroyed this form, and even then, uncertainty remained about whether Birkin might have survived to mutate again. The G-Virus granted Birkin several capabilities that elevated him above previous bioweapons. His regeneration exceeded even Nemesis's impressive healing. Each time Birkin was damaged, the virus responded by restructuring his body in ways that addressed the damage while enhancing capabilities. This adaptive evolution meant fighting G-Birkin became progressively more difficult as the battle continued. Unlike Nemesis, whose mutations degraded its intelligence, Birkin's transformations seemed to maintain at least base instincts, even if higher reasoning vanished. He continued pursuing specific targets and demonstrating enough cunning to track prey through complex environments. The virus also granted reproductive capability through a horrifying mechanic. G-Birkin could implant embryos into human hosts via specialized tentacles. These embryos would either merge with genetically compatible hosts, potentially creating new G-organisms, or violently reject and kill incompatible hosts before emerging as G-young organisms. This reproductive capacity meant G-Birkin represented not just a singular threat, but a potential extinction event, capable of spawning additional G creatures that could themselves reproduce. Only Sherry Birkin, William's daughter, proved genetically compatible enough for successful implantation, though the embryo was destroyed via specialized vaccine before full transformation occurred. G-Birkin's weaknesses stemmed primarily from the virus's success rather than failures. His continuous evolution, while granting increasing power, also demanded increasing energy. By his final form, Birkin had become so massive and metabolically demanding that mobility became nearly impossible. The virus's tendency toward producing eyes, while granting enhanced vision, also created vulnerable points that skilled combatants could exploit. Additionally, while the G-Virus prevented traditional death through regeneration, extreme physical trauma could overwhelm even its adaptive capacity, at least temporarily. The G-Virus's impact on Resident Evil's power hierarchy extends beyond Birkin's individual threat. It represented proof that biological weapons could achieve near unlimited power, scaling through evolutionary adaptation. Unlike fixed capability bioweapons, G creatures could grow stronger indefinitely given sufficient time and stress. This made them theoretically more dangerous than any static bioweapon, regardless of the static weapon's individual power level. A sufficiently evolved G creature could adapt to overcome almost any defense, developing new capabilities as needed to address obstacles. Comparative analysis places G-Birkin above Nemesis in raw power potential. While Nemesis possessed superior intelligence and weapon use in its early forms, G-Birkin's adaptive evolution allowed him to develop countermeasures to any threat. Where Nemesis's mutations degraded its combat effectiveness over time, G-Birkin's mutations enhanced his, at least until the final mass form's mobility issues emerged. In a hypothetical confrontation, early form Nemesis might initially dominate through tactical advantage, but G-Birkin's superior regeneration and evolution would eventually allow him to adapt and overcome. Birkin's documented defeat of the T-103 Tyrant in Resident Evil 2 provides concrete evidence of his superiority over Umbrella's premier Tyrant line. The ease with which First Form G-Birkin dispatched a bioweapon that required heavy explosives to neutralize demonstrated the G-Virus's fundamental superiority to the T-Virus for creating powerful organisms. The fact that progressively more powerful weapons and tactics were required as Birkin evolved through his forms further supports his placement as one of the franchise's most physically powerful entities. However, intelligence limitations prevent G-Birkin from ranking higher. Despite the virus maintaining some level of cognition, Birkin couldn't employ tactics, use weapons, or demonstrate the strategic thinking that would leverage his physical power effectively. He became a force of nature, incredibly destructive, but ultimately predictable. Entities ranking higher than G-Birkin combine comparable or greater physical power with intelligence that multiplies their threat level exponentially. Tier 3 superhuman masterminds Albert Wesker stands as perhaps the most iconic villain in Resident Evil history, and his power level justifies that status. Beginning as the captain of STAR's Alpha team, Wesker was secretly working for Umbrella Corporation while collecting combat data on bioweapons. His betrayal of his team during the Mansion incident seemed to end with his death at the claws of the T-2 Tyrant. However, Wesker's death was planned. Prior to the incident, his colleague William Birkin had provided him with an experimental prototype virus designed to trigger specific genetic advantages in compatible hosts. Wesker was one of perhaps 13 individuals worldwide with the genetics to survive the virus, and he was the only one known to successfully achieve full transformation. The prototype virus transformed Wesker into something beyond human. His strength increased to levels that allowed him to lift and throw missiles with one hand, punch through reinforced steel, and casually overpower trained operatives. In Resident Evil 5, Wesker lifted a fully laden rocket launcher and threw it like a javelin, demonstrating strength comparable to or exceeding most Tyrant models. His casual handling of Chris Redfield and Sheva Alomar, despite both being elite BSAA agents, illustrated the gulf between enhanced human capability and true superhumanity. What truly set Wesker apart was his speed. The prototype virus granted him reflexes and movement speed that made him appear to teleport. He could dodge bullets fired at point-blank range, move across combat arenas in apparent instants, and deliver multiple strikes before opponents could react. This speed wasn't merely enhanced human reflexes. It represented a categorical shift that placed Wesker in a different tier of existence. His signature combat style combined this impossible speed with devastating martial arts techniques, using moves he called Cobra Strike, Tiger Uppercut, and Windfall to deliver attacks that sent opponents flying through the air. Wesker's regenerative abilities allowed him to survive damage that would kill unmodified humans instantly, He recovered from having his face hideously burned within minutes. Bullets to vital areas, including his head, failed to kill him due to the virus's regenerative properties. When the tyrant killed him in the original mansion incident, the virus activated immediately, healing fatal injuries within minutes and triggering his full transformation. This healing factor, while not as dramatically visible as G-Birkin's or the mold-infected Jack Baker's regeneration, proved remarkably effective at maintaining Wesker's combat capability. Perhaps Wesker's most significant advantage came from his retained and enhanced intelligence. Unlike bioweapons that sacrifice cognitive function for physical power, the prototype virus appeared to enhance Wesker's already considerable intellect. He maintained perfect clarity, strategic thinking, and manipulative capability while gaining superhuman physical abilities. This combination proved devastating. Wesker could formulate complex plans involving multiple factions, manipulate allies and enemies alike, and maintain numerous operations simultaneously, while personally being nearly unkillable in direct confrontation. Throughout the series, Wesker demonstrated mastery of numerous weapons and martial arts. His time as a STARS officer provided military training that combined with viral enhancement to create a fighter equally dangerous, armed or unarmed. He favored his customized samurai edge pistol, but could effectively wield everything from assault rifles to magnums. However, he rarely needed weapons, as his physical capabilities allowed him to dominate most opponents through speed and strength alone. Wesker's documented combat performances support his placement among the franchise's most powerful individuals. In Code Veronica, he confronted Alexia Ashford, who had transformed using the T. Veronica virus. While different accounts vary on the details, Wesker demonstrated ability to contend with Alexia, another superhuman entity, suggesting rough parity between them. His confident approach to situations that would threaten ordinary enhanced humans indicated his awareness of his own capabilities and limitations. His battles against Chris Redfield across multiple games illustrated both his power and eventually his vulnerability. In their first encounters, Wesker effortlessly overpowered Chris, requiring Chris and his allies to use environmental advantages and specialized tactics rather than trying to match Wesker in direct combat. Even in Resident Evil 5, during their final confrontation, Chris and Shiva together barely managed to contend with Wesker, requiring specialized serum injections to weaken him before conventional weapons became effective. The serum represented Wesker's critical weakness. The prototype virus required regular doses of a stabilizing serum called PG67AW to maintain equilibrium within his body. Without regular doses, the virus began degrading his capabilities. Conversely, overdosing on the serum caused the virus to go haywire, inducing symptoms resembling poisoning that temporarily weakened him. This dependency meant that despite his godlike power, Wesker remained vulnerable to anyone who could exploit his need for chemical stabilization. Wesker's mutation near the end of Resident Evil 5 demonstrated the prototype virus's potential for catastrophic transformation if control was lost. After infecting himself with Ouroboros, a virus he had developed as the culmination of decades of research, Wesker's body underwent grotesque transformation. His arms became massive tentacles capable of absorbing and weaponizing metallic objects. This Ouroboros mutation granted even greater strength and resilience, but at the cost of the elegant efficiency that made Wesker so dangerous. The mutation made him more conventionally monstrous, reducing the speed advantage that had been one of his greatest assets. This final form proved his undoing. Overdosed with his stabilizing serum by Chris and Shiva, weakened by specialized ammunition, and finally exposed to intense heat from lava. Wesker died when a rocket launcher blast knocked him into molten rock. The fact that it required this combination of factors, specialized serum overdose, advanced weaponry, environmental hazards, and explosives to finally kill him, demonstrates just how resilient he had become. Wesker's intellect and long-term planning demonstrated power beyond physical capability. His manipulation of global events, his founding of multiple organizations, his role in spreading viral research worldwide, and his ultimate plan to use Ouroboros to reshape humanity into a species of superhumans like himself showed ambition and capability on a civilization-threatening scale. He wasn't merely personally powerful, he had positioned himself to alter the entire species if his plans succeeded. Comparing Wesker to other powerful entities reveals interesting contrasts. Against G-Birkin, Wesker's speed and intelligence would provide significant advantages in early confrontation. However, G-Birkin's superior regeneration and evolution might eventually allow adaptation that could threaten even Wesker. Against Nemesis, Wesker's speed would make him nearly untouchable, allowing him to strike at will while avoiding counterattacks. Jack Baker's regeneration might withstand Wesker's strikes, but Wesker's speed would prevent Jack from landing meaningful hits in return. What places Wesker in this tier is the combination of superhuman physical power, retained intelligence, combat skills, and long-term planning ability. He wasn't merely strong or fast, he was a genius tactician who happened to also be superhumanly powerful. This made him capable of threatening not just individuals but entire organizations and nations. His death required the combined efforts of the BSAA's most elite operatives, specialized weapons, and tremendous luck. Few characters in Resident Evil have proven as comprehensively dangerous as Albert Wesker at the height of his power. Tier 4, Reality Warping Bioweapons. Eveline represents a paradigm shift in bioweapon design, created by the Connections criminal syndicate using mold samples provided by Mother Miranda. Eveline was engineered as the E-01 prototype in a series designed to make conventional military force obsolete. Unlike bioweapons designed for direct combat, Eveline's power derived from control, the ability to infect and mentally dominate entire populations through a modified fungal agent called mutamacete. Eveline was designed to appear as a 10-year-old girl, making her unthreatening and capable of infiltrating locations where adults would draw suspicion. This innocent appearance masked capabilities that made her potentially more dangerous than any tyrant or viral mutation. The mutamycete she could produce and spread functioned as both weapon and communication network, infecting victims through various means including physical contact, inhalation, and ingestion. Once infected, subjects fell under Eveline's mental control. The nature of this control went beyond simple compulsion. Eveline could make her victims see her as whatever she wished, usually as a sweet child needing protection and love. She could trigger hallucinations, erase memories, implant false recollections, and fundamentally rewrite her victim's perception of reality. This made resistance nearly impossible for the infected, as they couldn't trust their own thoughts or perceptions. The Baker family, initially kind people who rescued Eveline from a shipwreck, became her unwilling thralls, forced to kidnap and infect others to expand her family. Eveline's range of influence proved extensive. Though her powers worked most effectively on those in close proximity, her control could extend across significant distances once subjects were fully infected. She could perceive through her victims' senses, effectively making every infected person an extension of herself. This created a surveillance and control network that grew exponentially with each new infection. In theory, if allowed to spread unchecked, Eveline could have infected entire cities, turning populations into willing slaves who would spread her influence further while remaining convinced they acted of their own free will. The mutamycete granted additional capabilities beyond mind control. It could preserve consciousness and memories, essentially creating biological backups of infected individuals. When Ethan Winters died early in Resident Evil 7 during his first encounter with Jack Baker, the mold reconstructed him, preserving his consciousness and personality while replacing his physical body with fungal biomass. This happened without Ethan's knowledge, meaning the reconstruction was perfect enough to fool even the subject. For 3 years, Ethan lived as a mold duplicate of himself without realizing his true nature. This reconstructive capability meant Eveline could theoretically preserve and resurrect her family indefinitely. The Bakers demonstrated extreme regeneration, with Jack surviving injuries that would kill normal humans many times over. Marguerite developed insect-like mutations and wall-crawling abilities. Lucas gained enhanced intelligence and sadistic inclinations, though he managed to break free of Eveline's control through a serum provided by an outside organization. Each family member's mutations reflected Eveline's attempt to mold them into her ideal family, demonstrating the mold's capacity for tailored transformation. Eveline's weakness stemmed from her accelerated aging. The connections had engineered her with this limitation as a failsafe. She would age rapidly, dying of old age within a few years, if not regularly administered medication to slow the process. During her time with the Bakers, she aged from apparent 10 years to elderly appearance, becoming physically frail while her mental powers remained intact. This aging brought her pain and instability, making her increasingly desperate and erratic. By the time Ethan confronted her in Resident Evil 7, Eveline had become a withered, wheelchair-bound figure, though still immensely dangerous due to her psychic capabilities. The specialized E-necrotoxin serum provided the key to defeating Eveline. This toxin specifically targeted the mutamycete, calcifying infected tissue and breaking the mental connection between Eveline and her victims. When Ethan, aided by BSAA support, infected Eveline with the toxin and shot her, her body calcified and crumbled. However, her consciousness didn't truly die. Fragments survived within the mold network, including within Ethan himself. Years later, these fragments would manifest to Ethan after his heart was ripped out by Mother Miranda, revealing to him that he had been mold-based since his death. In Louisiana, Eveline's significance extends beyond her individual threat level. She represented proof that bioweapons could achieve strategic objectives through means other than direct combat. A single Eveline, properly deployed, could infiltrate and subvert entire governments, military bases, or population centers without firing a shot. This made her development controversial even within the bioweapon black market, as her success would render traditional weapons, including other bioweapons, economically obsolete. The connection between Eveline and Mother Miranda reveals a deeper dimension to her power. Created using Miranda's mold and DNA from Miranda's daughter Eva, Eveline represented an attempt to recreate what Miranda had achieved a century earlier. However, Eveline proved fundamentally unstable, her desperate need for family and love making her unpredictable and difficult to control. This instability, rather than any lack of power, made her unsuitable as a vessel for Eva's consciousness in Miranda's eyes. Comparing Eveline to physical powerhouses like Wesker, or G-Birkin reveals different categories of threat. In direct physical confrontation, Eveline would be nearly helpless. Her elderly body lacked strength or speed to threaten capable fighters. However, she would never allow such confrontation to occur fairly. Through her mental control, she could turn allies against each other, create hallucinations that made hitting her impossible, and mentally break opponents before they reached her. Her power operated on psychological and biological levels that rendered conventional combat ability largely irrelevant. Against Wesker specifically, an interesting scenario emerges. Wesker's prototype virus granted superhuman abilities, but didn't necessarily provide immunity to fungal infection. If Eveline managed to infect him with mutamycete before he recognized the threat, his immense physical power would become hers to control. Alternatively, Wesker's intelligence and experience with bioweapons might allow him to recognize the danger and eliminate her before infection occurred. Though the mold's various transmission vectors would make complete avoidance difficult, Eveline's placement in this tier reflects the reality warping nature of her capabilities. She didn't merely possess power, she could alter how victims perceived and understood reality. This places her abilities in a category distinct from physical strength or regeneration. Entities at her level and above don't simply overpower opponents, they reshape the fundamental rules of engagement. Physical power becomes less relevant than ontological manipulation, the ability to change what reality means for those affected. However, Eveline's youth, instability, and dependence on medication prevent her from ranking at the absolute pinnacle. She represented a prototype, immensely powerful but flawed. The entity who created her and provided the mold that granted her capabilities operates on a different scale entirely, having perfected these abilities over a century of research and experimentation. The apex, Mother Miranda, and the megamycete. At the apex of Resident Evil's power hierarchy stands Mother Miranda, the biologist whose century-long manipulation of reality shaped virtually every major event in the franchise's timeline. Born in the late 19th century in an isolated Eastern European mountain village, Miranda's journey to godlike power began with tragedy. Her daughter Eva died at age 10 during the Spanish flu pandemic of 1919, leaving Miranda devastated. Seeking death herself, she entered a cave beneath the village and discovered something that would transform her grief into terrible purpose: the megamycete. The megamycete was an ancient fungal supercolony, possibly existing for thousands of years, that had grown beneath the village into a massive, interconnected organism. This fungal network functioned as a biological data storage system, preserving the consciousness, memories, and genetic information of every organism it had ever consumed or contacted. When Miranda touched the megamycete, she became infected with its mold. Unlike Eveline, who was artificially created using mold samples, Miranda bonded with the original source organism at a cellular level, achieving a fusion unique in the franchise. The mold infection granted Miranda abilities that effectively made her immortal. She ceased aging, maintaining her physical form for over a century without degradation. Her regenerative capacity exceeded any viral mutation seen in the series. She could recover from wounds that would kill other bioweapons instantly, including being shot repeatedly in the head. Bullets would pass through her body, and the wounds would seal immediately. This regeneration wasn't merely tissue repair. It was fundamental cellular reconstruction that operated faster than most weapons could inflict damage. Miranda gained perfect control over her physical form through shape-shifting. She could alter her appearance to mimic anyone she had studied, changing not just visual appearance but voice, mannerisms, and even scent. This ability wasn't illusion or hallucination, it was actual physical transformation, her cells restructuring to create whatever form she desired. She used this capability to infiltrate the Baker family by impersonating an elderly woman, to study targets without their knowledge, and eventually to replace Mia Winters for an extended period without anyone noticing the substitution. Her shape-shifting extended beyond mere mimicry. Miranda could grow wings from her back, transform her limbs into bladed weapons, and create masses of mold that functioned as both offense and defense. In her true combative form, she became a mixture of human and fungal characteristics, with wing-like protrusions, armored plating, and tendrils that could strike or bind opponents. This form combined tremendous physical power with a regeneration that made her nearly unkillable through conventional means. Beyond personal power, Miranda possessed knowledge that made her the franchise's most influential figure. Her understanding of the megamycete gave her insights into consciousness, memory, and the fundamental nature of life. She recognized that the fungal network preserved not just biological data, but actual consciousness, meaning everything consumed by the mold contributed its experiences and awareness to the collective. This led her to believe she could resurrect Eva by finding a suitable vessel and transferring Eva's preserved consciousness from the megamycete into that vessel. This belief drove her actions for over a century. Miranda established herself as a prophet to the villagers, claiming to represent the Black God, her term for the megamycete. She used her powers and knowledge to cure the sick, creating loyal followers while secretly experimenting on them with mold infection. Most villagers either died or transformed into lichens, wolf-like creatures that retained minimal intelligence but served as obedient guards for the region. However, 4 individuals proved compatible with a more refined form of infection using parasites called Kadu, engineered by exposing nematodes to mold. These 4 became the 4 lords: Alcina Dimitrescu, Karl Heisenberg, Donna Beneviento, and Salvatore Moreau. Each developed unique abilities reflecting their psychological characteristics and how the Kadu interacted with their biology. Lady Dimitrescu gained vampiric characteristics, including superhuman strength, retractable claws, and a towering height. Heisenberg developed electromagnetic manipulation abilities, allowing him to control metal. Beneviento gained control over a networked colony of plants that could produce powerful hallucinogens. Moreau's transformation was less controlled, leaving him deformed but immensely strong when mutated. The 4 lords served Miranda while ruling different sections of the village region, each conducting their own experiments and maintaining order in their domains. However, none possessed power rivaling Miranda's own. She had created them, understood their abilities better than they did, and could theoretically strip their powers if necessary. They were her tools and her experiments, candidates for Eva's vessel, who had proven worthy of enhanced existence, but insufficient for Miranda's ultimate purpose. Miranda's influence extended far beyond her village. In the 1950s, she met and mentored a young Oswell Spencer, showing him her research on the mold and discussing the possibilities of viral research. Though Spencer ultimately rejected the fungal approach in favor of viral engineering, he founded Umbrella Corporation, partly inspired by Miranda's work. The Umbrella Corporation logo, 4 interlocking segments, was based on symbols Miranda used representing her 4 lords. Through this connection, Miranda indirectly influenced the creation of every major outbreak in Resident Evil's timeline: the T-virus, G-virus, and countless other bioweapons trace their conceptual lineage to research paths Miranda had illuminated. In 2000, Miranda was approached by the Connections, which sought her expertise in mold samples for their own bioweapon program. Miranda provided both a sample of mold and an embryonic clone of Eva, leading to Eveline's creation. Though Miranda considered Eveline a failure as a vessel for Eva, too unstable and obsessed with creating family rather than being family, the E-Series development taught her valuable information about what wouldn't work. Eveline's accidental escape and infection of the Baker family proved fortuitous for Miranda, as it allowed her to observe how mold interacted with humans over extended periods, and led her to discover Ethan Winters. Ethan became crucial to Miranda's plans after his death and mold-based resurrection during the Baker incident. When Ethan and his wife Mia conceived a child, Rosemary Miranda recognized that a child born to two mold-infected parents might possess the stability and compatibility needed for Eva's vessel. This led to the events of Resident Evil Village, where Miranda orchestrated Mia's replacement, the Winters' relocation to Europe, and eventually Rose's kidnapping and division among the Four Lords. Miranda's combat capabilities proved extraordinary during the final confrontation. Ethan, armed with Chris Redfield's support and advanced weaponry, fought Miranda after she had absorbed Rose's power, further enhancing her already tremendous abilities. She demonstrated speed, rivaling or exceeding Wesker's, strength sufficient to rend steel, and regeneration so powerful that explosive damage healed within seconds. She could fly using her wings, strike from multiple angles simultaneously using mold tendrils, and create barriers that blocked conventional attacks. What made Miranda truly dangerous was the combination of these physical powers with her century of accumulated knowledge and tactical experience. She had outlived entire generations, studied countless biological systems, and developed strategies refined through decades of experimentation. Unlike younger superhumans who relied on raw power, Miranda fought with the efficiency of someone who had already seen every possible tactic an opponent might attempt. Her vulnerability emerged from an unexpected source, Ethan Winters himself. As a mold-based organism, Ethan could interact with the Megamycetes network on levels that conventional humans couldn't. His consciousness, preserved and maintained by mold, gave him partial access to the collective awareness. More importantly, his connection to Rose, another mold-based being, allowed him to reach her even after Miranda had absorbed her. When Ethan freed Rose, the resulting mold backlash disrupted Miranda's connection to the Megamycete, temporarily weakening her regeneration enough for conventional weapons to cause lasting damage. Even then, killing Miranda required tremendous effort. Chris Redfield's tactical genius, Ethan's sacrifice. He died permanently after the battle, his mold body having taken too much damage to maintain consciousness. Specialized BSAA weaponry, and the systemic failure of Miranda's connection to the Megamycete all proved necessary. The final blow involved destroying Miranda's physical form so thoroughly that even her regeneration couldn't reconstruct it before her consciousness faded. Miranda's death didn't erase her impact. Her research influenced everything from Umbrella's founding to modern bioweapon development. The Megamycete's remnants continued affecting the region, with Chris and the BSAA working to contain and study the fungal outbreak. Most significantly, Rose inherited Miranda's connection to the mold, potentially making her the most powerful individual in the franchise's future. The Shadows of Rose DLC revealed that remnants of Miranda's consciousness survived within the Megamycetes collective, attempting to manipulate Rose decades after her physical death. Comparing Miranda to other top-tier entities reveals her unique position. Unlike Wesker, who derived power from a virus that required constant maintenance, Miranda's fusion with the Megamycete was stable and permanent. Unlike Eveline, whose control required active concentration and was limited by her aging body, Miranda's abilities were reflexive and maintained across a century without degradation. Unlike G-Birkin, whose evolution followed predictable patterns, Miranda's shape-shifting allowed instant adaptation to any situation without requiring damage-triggered mutation. In hypothetical confrontations, Miranda would likely defeat almost any other entity in the franchise. Her regeneration exceeded Wesker's. Her intelligence and experience surpassed any other character, and her shape-shifting and mold manipulation provided versatility that could counter most tactical approaches. Only Rose, representing the next evolution of mold-based beings, might eventually exceed Miranda's capabilities. Miranda's placement at the apex stems from more than individual power. She shaped the entire franchise's trajectory, influenced nearly every major character and event, and represented the conceptual endpoint of what biological manipulation could achieve. She transformed from grieving mother to immortal entity, from human to something fundamentally other, all while retaining her essential self and singular purpose. This combination of power, influence, longevity, and thematic significance makes her the strongest character in Resident Evil's canon. Special consideration, Rosemary Winters, and future potential. While most of this ranking examines characters at their documented peak power, Rosemary Winters deserves consideration despite her youth and underdeveloped capabilities. Born to two mold-infected parents in 2020, Rose represents something unprecedented, a natural-born being whose entire cellular structure consists of mold from conception. Unlike Ethan, who was reconstructed by mold after death, or Miranda, who bonded with it during adulthood, Rose's biology incorporated mold as its fundamental building block. This makes her potentially more powerful than even Miranda. The Shadows of Rose DLC, set when Rose has reached teenage years, demonstrates abilities exceeding what young Miranda displayed. Rose can manipulate mold consciously, creating barriers, weapons, and constructs from fungal matter. She can sense mold-connected entities across vast distances and potentially access the Megamycete's collective consciousness more deeply than Miranda ever did. Her regenerative abilities appear automatic and effortless, healing injuries that would require conscious effort from other mold-based beings. Most significantly, Rose demonstrates resistance to mental manipulation that affected even powerful entities. When confronting remnants of Miranda's consciousness within the Megamycete's realm, Rose proved capable of resisting and overcoming psychological attacks that had broken trained operatives. Her combination of natural mold abilities, inherited human intelligence, and training from Chris Redfield and BSAA agents positions her as potentially the most powerful being in the franchise's future. However, Rose's current limitations prevent definitive ranking. Her youth means incomplete development of her capabilities. Her psychological struggles with her identity and desire to be normal suggest she hasn't fully embraced or explored her powers. The epilogue of Resident Evil Village shows her working with Chris and the BSAA, implying she's being trained and guided rather than operating at full potential. Until future games demonstrate Rose's mature capabilities, she remains a promising but unproven entity. What's certain is that Rose represents the next stage of power evolution within Resident Evil. If Miranda stood as the apex of first-generation mold fusion, Rose embodies second-generation refinement. Her stable genetics, lack of psychological trauma driving her powers, and natural integration of mold abilities suggest she could eventually surpass every character on this ranking. Future Resident Evil titles will likely explore this potential, possibly positioning Rose as either humanity's greatest defender against bioterrorism, or, if her psychology fractures under pressure, its most dangerous threat. Honorable mentions: characters of significant power. Several characters demonstrated substantial power, but fell short of the main ranking for various reasons. These individuals deserve acknowledgement for their capabilities, even if they don't reach the top tiers. Alexia Ashford, infected with the T. Veronica virus, possessed tremendous power, including pyrokinesis, blood manipulation, and the ability to control infected insects. Her transformation granted her abilities that placed her roughly parallel to Wesker during Code Veronica. However, her limited appearances and relatively brief impact on the franchise's overall narrative place her outside the primary ranking. Had she survived longer and demonstrated her capabilities more extensively, she might have ranked among the top tier. The four lords each displayed remarkable abilities. Alcina Dimitrescu's vampiric strength, regeneration, and her mutated dragon form made her a formidable opponent. Karl Heisenberg's electromagnetic manipulation represented a unique power set, allowing him to control metal objects and construct mechanical bioweapon hybrids. Donna Beneviento's hallucinogenic plants could trap victims in nightmare scenarios indistinguishable from reality. Salvatore Moreau's aquatic mutations granted him tremendous strength in his domain. Yet all four served Miranda, were created by her, and demonstrated power levels clearly below hers. They functioned as regional threats rather than civilization-ending entities. Ustanak, the enhanced BOW from Resident Evil 6, showed impressive durability and strength, capable of surviving multiple apparent deaths and pursuing Jake Muller across the globe. However, its lack of true intelligence and limited adaptability kept it below the franchise's premier threats. It represented a refined, Nemesis-style pursuer, but didn't demonstrate abilities surpassing the original. Derek Simmons, after infecting himself with an enhanced C-virus strain, underwent multiple mutations that granted him incredible power and regeneration. His transformations allowed him to survive falls from skyscrapers, regenerate from being impaled, and continue fighting despite massive trauma. However, his mutations proved less controllable than G-Birkin's, and his documented combat performance placed him below the top tier. Lisa Trevor deserves special mention as a tragic figure whose body hosted multiple viral and parasitic infections over decades of experimentation. Her regeneration and resilience exceeded most bioweapons, surviving treatments that killed other test subjects. She endured the progenitor virus, T virus, and the NEA-type parasite that eventually became the foundation for the Nemesis Project and G-Virus. However, Lisa's mental state and limited mobility prevented her from demonstrating combat effectiveness comparable to deliberately engineered bioweapons. Her significance lies more in her contribution to bioweapon development than her individual threat level. Power tiers summarized. Analyzing these characters reveals distinct power tiers within Resident Evil's hierarchy. At the foundation sit enhanced humans, individuals like Chris, Jill, and Leon whose training, experience, and minor augmentations allow them to contend with bioweapon threats, but who remain fundamentally human in their limitations. They survive through intelligence, tactics, and indomitable will rather than raw power. The first tier above them includes intelligent bioweapons like Nemesis and mold-infected individuals like Jack Baker. These entities possess regeneration, superhuman strength, and enough intelligence to use tactics and weapons. They represent genuine threats requiring specialized approaches to defeat, but they demonstrate clear vulnerabilities that can be exploited by sufficiently prepared opponents. The second tier encompasses evolved mutations like G-Birkin, whose adaptive capacity allows progressive power increases through multiple transformations. These entities don't simply possess power, they actively gain more as combat continues, making them progressively more dangerous. Their regeneration and evolution makes them extraordinarily difficult to permanently defeat. The third tier features superhuman masterminds like Wesker, who combine physical superiority with retained intelligence, tactical acumen, and long-term planning capability. These individuals threaten not just through personal combat prowess, but through their ability to orchestrate events on global scales. They represent peak examples of controlled enhancement, demonstrating what biological augmentation can achieve without sacrificing cognition. The fourth tier includes reality warping bioweapons like Eveline, whose powers operate on psychological and ontological levels that transcend physical confrontation. These entities alter perception, control minds, and reshape how reality functions for those affected by their influence. Conventional combat becomes nearly irrelevant against threats that attack consciousness itself. At the apex stands Mother Miranda, whose century of fusion with the Megamycete granted abilities that encompass all previous tiers while adding unique dimensions. She possesses the physical power of top-tier bioweapons, the intelligence and tactical skill of enhanced masterminds, the regenerative and adaptive capacity of evolutionary mutations, and consciousness level abilities rivaling reality warpers. Her longevity, experience, and fundamental influence on the franchise's events elevate her beyond all others. The nature of power in horror. Examining Resident Evil's power hierarchy reveals interesting patterns about how power functions within horror narratives. Traditional horror emphasizes vulnerability. Protagonists survive against overwhelming odds through cleverness rather than strength. Resident Evil has evolved beyond pure horror into action horror, introducing protagonists and antagonists with capabilities that would dominate conventional action franchises. Yet the franchise maintains horror elements by ensuring power comes with costs. Wesker's strength demanded chemical dependency. G-Birkin's evolution stripped away his humanity. Eveline's mental control couldn't prevent her from aging into frailty. Miranda's immortality couldn't bring back her daughter, despite a century of effort. Power in Resident Evil is never clean or simple. It's purchased through loss of humanity, stability, or agency. The protagonists who survive do so not by matching villains in raw power, but by exploiting weaknesses, using environment and preparation, and maintaining their humanity even when facing entities that transcend it. Chris punching boulders became a meme, yet even at his most physically impressive, Chris succeeds through teamwork and tactics rather than personal power. Leon's evolution into an elite agent didn't make him superhuman. It made him exceptionally skilled at being human. This dynamic creates interesting narrative tension. The protagonists can't simply become as powerful as the threats they face without losing what makes them protagonists. Meanwhile, the antagonist's increasing power demands increasingly creative solutions for defeat. Early games allowed players to defeat bioweapons through sufficient firepower. Later entries require environmental kills, specialized weaknesses, or multiple coordinated operators using experimental technology. The power escalation also reflects thematic concerns about biological research and enhancement. Each generation of bioweapon represents humanity's hubris, the belief that we can control and weaponize natural processes without consequence. The most powerful entities, Miranda, Eveline, G-Birkin, all represent research that escaped control, transforming from tools into existential threats. The message remains clear. Power gained through biological manipulation inevitably comes with uncontrollable consequences. Evolution of bioweapon design philosophy. Tracing the evolution of bioweapon design across Resident Evil's timeline reveals shifting philosophies about what makes an effective weapon. Early Umbrella research focused on creating controllable soldiers, tyrants that could follow orders and overwhelm conventional military forces through strength and durability. These efforts produced powerful but limited creatures whose lack of intelligence prevented sophisticated deployment. The Nemesis Project represented the first successful integration of intelligence with tyrant-level physical power. By adding the NEA parasite to grant higher cognition, Umbrella created a bioweapon that could use tactics, operate weapons, and pursue specific targets. This proved substantially more effective than previous models, though Nemesis's eventual degradation through mutation showed the approach's limitations. William Birkin's G-Virus pursued a different philosophy, evolution over engineering. Rather than trying to create a stable, controllable weapon, the G-Virus produced organisms capable of unlimited adaptation. This made G-creatures theoretically more powerful than any fixed capability bioweapon, but also made them completely uncontrollable. The virus prioritized its own propagation over following orders, making it unsuitable for military applications despite its impressive power. Wesker's approach with Ouroboros attempted to combine the best aspects, create a virus that would elevate compatible hosts to superhuman status, while rejecting incompatible hosts. He envisioned a world where only the genetically worthy would survive transformation, creating a new species of superhumans under his leadership. However, Ouroboros proved as uncontrollable as G-Virus, with rejected hosts becoming mindless masses of tentacles rather than simply dying. The Connections E-Series with Eveline represented a conceptual breakthrough, mental control over physical power. Rather than creating stronger soldiers, create a weapon that could turn enemy soldiers into allies. This approach recognized that in modern warfare, subversion often proves more valuable than destruction. A single Eveline could theoretically infiltrate and control entire military bases or government facilities without firing a shot, making conventional bioweapons obsolete. Miranda's research with the mold predated all of this, representing perhaps the most sophisticated approach, symbiotic fusion rather than parasitic infection. The megamycete didn't destroy its host biology, it integrated with it, preserving consciousness while granting enhancement. This created beings who retained their intelligence and humanity while gaining tremendous power. Miranda herself stood as proof that this approach could produce stable, long-lasting augmentation without the degradation plaguing viral mutations. Each evolution in bioweapon philosophy reflected lessons learned from previous failures. The constant driver remained the desire for controllable power, the belief that with proper engineering, biological weapons could be directed reliably. Yet every attempt at control eventually failed, with creations escaping containment, exceeding parameters, or developing their own agendas. The franchise's recurring message warns that biological systems resist control, that tampering with fundamental life processes inevitably produces unpredictable consequences. Comparative combat analysis. Understanding relative power levels benefits from considering hypothetical confrontations between top-tier entities. While such scenarios never occurred in canon, examining how documented abilities might interact provides insight into power relationships. Consider Wesker versus G-Birkin. Wesker's speed would initially dominate, allowing him to strike G-Birkin repeatedly while avoiding counterattacks. However, G-Birkin's regeneration would heal damage faster than Wesker could inflict it through physical strikes alone. As the battle continued, G-Birkin would evolve, potentially developing adaptations to counter Wesker's speed advantage. The outcome would likely depend on whether Wesker could exploit G-Birkin's eye weaknesses before the G-Virus produced enough mutations to overwhelm even Wesker's capabilities. Advantage Wesker in early forms, G-Birkin if the battle extends. Nemesis versus Eveline presents an interesting clash of physical versus mental power. Nemesis's initial form possessed intelligence sufficient to potentially recognize Eveline as a threat and attempt immediate elimination. However, if Eveline infected Nemesis with mutamycete, the question becomes whether the T-virus and NE, a parasite, would provide immunity, or whether fungal infection would override them. Given the mold's ability to preserve and manipulate consciousness, Eveline would likely gain control once infection established itself. Advantage Eveline, assuming she avoids immediate physical destruction. Miranda versus Wesker offers perhaps the most competitive matchup among apex tier entities. Both possess tremendous speed, strength, and regeneration. Wesker's martial arts expertise would prove formidable, but Miranda's century of experience and shape-shifting versatility would provide counters to his techniques. Wesker's serum dependency represents a critical weakness Miranda could exploit if she learned of it, while Miranda's connection to the megamycete might be vulnerable to disruption if Wesker understood how to target it. In prolonged combat, Miranda's superior regeneration and lack of dependency on external substances would likely prevail. Advantage Miranda. G-Birkin versus Nemesis would showcase evolution against intelligence. Early form Nemesis's weapon use and tactics would inflict significant damage on first form G-Birkin. However, G-Birkin's superior regeneration and adaptive mutations would eventually allow him to overcome Nemesis's advantages. As both creatures mutated through damage, G-Birkin's evolution would grant increasing power, while Nemesis's mutations would degrade its tactical capability. Advantage G-Birkin in prolonged engagement. Jack Baker versus Nemesis highlights two different regenerative philosophies. Nemesis's structured mutations followed patterns determined by Umbrella's engineering, while Jack's mold-based regeneration adapted organically to damage. Nemesis's superior strength, speed, and weapon use would dominate initially, but Jack's seemingly limitless regeneration might outlast even Nemesis's impressive healing. The battle would likely end in Nemesis's favor only if it could inflict damage faster than Jack could heal, potentially through its tentacle impalements or late-stage acid attacks. Advantage Nemesis, though victory would require significant effort. These hypothetical matchups reveal that raw power alone doesn't determine outcomes. Speed, intelligence, regeneration, adaptability, and tactical thinking all contribute to combat effectiveness. The most powerful entities combine multiple advantages, making them difficult to counter through any single approach. Impact on Resident Evil's world beyond individual power levels. These characters' impact on Resident Evil's world provides another measure of their significance. Some possess tremendous personal power but limited influence. Others reshape the entire franchise's trajectory through their actions and research. Mother Miranda stands paramount in lasting impact. Her research inspired Oswell Spencer to found Umbrella Corporation. Her provision of mold samples to the Connections enabled Eveline's creation. Her century of experimentation produced the Kadu parasites and Four Lords. Every major outbreak, every viral weapon, every corporate conspiracy in Resident Evil traces conceptual lineage to ideas Miranda explored or inspired. Even after her death, her legacy continues through Rose and the Megamycetes remnants. Albert Wesker's influence rivals Miranda's, though concentrated in a shorter time frame. His betrayal triggered the Mansion incident. His theft of viral samples enabled rival organizations to develop their own bioweapons. His formation of various organizations and manipulation of global events spread bioweapon technology worldwide. His development of Ouroboros represented an attempt to reshape humanity itself. Wesker's machinations ensured bioterrorism became a permanent global threat rather than isolated incidents. William Birkin's discovery of the G-virus directly caused the Raccoon City outbreak, the franchise's most significant disaster. His work on the T-virus laid foundations for Umbrella's bioweapon programs. His daughter Sherry, infected with G-virus and possessing unique regenerative abilities, became a person of interest for multiple organizations. The G-virus samples recovered from Raccoon City influenced subsequent research by Tricell and other organizations. Eveline's escape and infection of the Baker family demonstrated how a single bioweapon could create persistent, localized horrors. Her infection of Ethan and Mia led to Rose's unique existence, potentially creating the most powerful being in the franchise's future. The E-Series concept she embodied influenced thinking about bioweapon applications, shifting focus toward mental control over physical power. Nemesis, despite being a prototype, proved the viability of intelligent tyrants. Its successful operation in Raccoon City provided combat data that informed subsequent bioweapon development. The psychological impact of an intelligent, relentless pursuer influenced how future bioweapons were designed and deployed. Even characters who didn't directly influence events significantly contributed to the franchise's themes and tone. G-Birkin's tragic transformation from brilliant scientist to mindless monster personified the dangers of unchecked research. Jack Baker's corruption from caring family man to monstrous puppet illustrated bioweapons' capacity to destroy everything they touch. Lisa Trevor's decades of suffering demonstrated the human cost of bioweapon research. Thematic significance of power. The characters analyzed here represent more than combat statistics or threat levels. They embody Resident Evil's exploration of what power costs and what it reveals about those who seek it. Miranda sought power to resurrect her daughter. Her love twisted into century-long obsession that destroyed countless lives. Her tragedy lies not in her evil, but in her inability to accept loss, to recognize that some things can't be restored regardless of power or knowledge. She achieved godlike capabilities, but could never achieve the simple human happiness taken from her by disease. Wesker pursued power for its own sake, believing himself evolved beyond humanity and destined to rule. His transformation from special operative to superhuman to Ouroboros infected monster charted a progression where each power gain cost him more humanity. His death came not from lack of power, but from arrogance. His conviction that he couldn't be stopped led him to underestimate prepared opponents. Birkin's power came from scientific achievement, his G-virus representing the pinnacle of his research. Yet when he infected himself to survive gunshot wounds, he lost everything that made his achievement meaningful. His mutation stripped away his identity, his relationships, and ultimately his consciousness. The power his virus granted couldn't preserve what mattered most. William Birkin, the person, ceased to exist, replaced by G-Birkin, the creature. Eveline wanted the simplest thing, a family who loved her. Her tremendous power over minds and bodies couldn't create genuine love or acceptance. Every person she forced into her family was a puppet, not a real relationship. Her power isolated her absolutely, ensuring she could never experience the authentic connection she desperately craved. The heroes who survived encounters with these entities did so by rejecting the temptation of comparable power. Chris, Jill, Leon, and others remained human, accepting their limitations while developing skills that allowed them to overcome superhuman threats. Their victories affirmed that humanity, cooperation, and determination could triumph over individual power when applied intelligently. This thematic consistency separates Resident Evil from simple power fantasy. The franchise doesn't glorify power, it interrogates it, showing how power corrupts, isolates, and ultimately destroys those who pursue it without wisdom or restraint. The most powerful characters are invariably the most tragic or monstrous, their capabilities separating them from human connection and driving them toward inevitable downfall. The future of power in Resident Evil. As the franchise continues, power scaling faces interesting challenges. Each new entry must present threats that justify continued struggle while avoiding power creep that makes earlier threats irrelevant. Rose's emergence as a potentially unmatched entity provides one direction. Rather than escalating to greater threats, future games might explore how someone with tremendous power chooses to use it, whether for protection or destruction. The shift toward mold-based stories after Resident Evil 7 introduced possibilities distinct from viral bioweapons. Fungal infection provides different narrative opportunities, emphasizing consciousness, memory, and identity over physical mutation. This allows power exploration through psychological rather than purely physical dimensions. Future antagonists might pursue entirely different power sources. The franchise has explored viral mutation, fungal infection, parasitic control, and genetic engineering. Possibilities remain in other biological systems, technological augmentation, or hybrid approaches combining biological and mechanical enhancement. Alternatively, future stories might de-escalate power levels, returning to more grounded horror where bioweapons are dangerous but not reality warping. The remake series' success suggests audience appetite exists for Resident Evil's earlier tone, where survival horror and resource management created tension through vulnerability rather than spectacular set pieces. Regardless of direction, the franchise will likely continue exploring power's price. Resident Evil's core identity involves humans contending with threats beyond their natural capability, surviving through intelligence and cooperation rather than matching enemies in raw strength. This dynamic has sustained the series for nearly 3 decades and will likely continue defining it regardless of how specific power levels fluctuate. Conclusion: the rankings confirmed. Having examined the franchise's most powerful entities through multiple lenses, physical capability, intelligence, documented combat performance, scope of influence, and thematic significance, the hierarchy becomes clear. At the apex stands Mother Miranda, whose fusion with the megamycete granted her immortality, shape-shifting, reality warping regeneration, and influence spanning over a century. Her research inspired virtually every major event in the franchise. No other character approaches her combination of personal power, longevity, and historical impact. Just below her sits Albert Wesker, whose prototype virus infection created perhaps the perfect balance of superhuman physical capability and retained genius intellect. His speed, strength, regeneration, and combat skills made him personally nearly unbeatable, while his manipulative genius threatened the world itself. Only specialized tactics exploiting his serum dependency enabled his defeat. Eveline occupies the third position despite physical weakness, her mind control and reality warping abilities operating on levels that made conventional combat irrelevant. Her potential to subvert entire populations through fungal infection represented an existential threat distinct from, but comparable to, the most powerful physical combatants. William G-Birkin ranks fourth. His unlimited evolutionary potential through the G virus, allowing progressive power, increases that eventually surpassed most bioweapons. Though he lost intelligence through mutation, his raw adaptive power and regeneration made him extraordinarily difficult to kill. Nemesis T-Type takes fifth position as the most successful intelligent tyrant, combining superhuman physical capabilities with tactical thinking and weapon use. Its relentless pursuit of STARS members and extraordinary regeneration made it one of Umbrella's most effective weapons despite its eventual degradation through mutation. Jack Baker rounds out the top tier, his mold-enhanced regeneration allowing him to survive injuries that would kill nearly any other entity. Though less intelligent than the engineered bioweapons above him, his unpredictable adaptation and relentless nature made him a formidable threat. Below these apex entities sit numerous other powerful characters: Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Leon Kennedy, the Four Lords, and various other bioweapons and enhanced humans. Each contributed significantly to Resident Evil's narrative and demonstrated impressive capabilities. However, none matched the top tier's combination of power, influence, and impact on the franchise's trajectory. These rankings reflect canon as documented across mainline games, official materials, and confirmed lore. They avoid speculation about hypothetical scenarios or unproven capabilities, instead focusing on demonstrated feats and documented battles. Power in Resident Evil encompasses more than combat ability. It includes intelligence, adaptability, influence, and lasting impact on the world. By these comprehensive measures, the hierarchy presented here reflects the true power relationships within one of horror gaming's most enduring franchises. The characters examined here shaped Resident Evil's evolution from survival horror to action horror epic. They established the boundaries of what biological manipulation can achieve while exploring the costs such power demands. They created the nightmares that defined a genre while embodying cautionary tales about ambition, grief, and humanity's hubris. Understanding their power levels provides insight not just into Resident Evil's fictional hierarchy, but into the franchise's enduring themes and storytelling philosophy. From enhanced humans surviving through skill and determination to immortal entities manipulating reality itself, Resident Evil's power spectrum remains one of gaming's most diverse and compelling. These characters ensure that after nearly 30 years, the franchise continues delivering compelling threats while exploring what happens when humanity's reach exceeds its wisdom. They are the monsters, masterminds, and mutations that transform survival horror into something larger, a meditation on power itself, what it costs to obtain, and whether any price is worth paying.